She didn't ask whose dog it was. She didn't care. That was her first mistake. It was a Saturday in late September, the kind of morning that only comes to Victoria, British Columbia, a few times a year, cool air carrying salt from the strait, maple leaves going rust and gold along the walking paths of Beacon Hill Park, families spread out on the grass. Kids chased each other between the old oak trees. Vendors sold coffee from little carts near the fountain, and at the far end of the off-leash area, a man sat alone on a wooden bench with a large German shepherd at his feet. His name was Reed. That's all most people ever knew about him. He didn't volunteer a last name. He didn't make small talk. He was 38 years old, built like someone who had been tested repeatedly by things most people never imagined, and had survived all of them without making a fuss about it. He was on leave from the Canadian Navy, specifically from the Naval Special Operations Forces, the kind of unit that didn't advertise its existence and didn't encourage its members to discuss their work at dinner parties. Reed had come to Victoria to rest. His sister lived here, in a small house on Fern Street, and she had an extra room and a quiet yard, and she knew better than to ask too many questions. So Reed came when he needed to breathe, and he brought the dog, and together they walked and sat and didn't bother anyone. The dog's name was Axel. Axel was 4 years old, jet black with tan markings along his jaw and chest, trained to a standard that most people would have found unbelievable if they had seen it demonstrated. He could locate a concealed person in a building the size of a warehouse. He could hold position under live fire. He had been through 3 overseas deployments alongside Reed and had never once broken command. Right now, he was lying on the cool grass with his chin on his paws, watching pigeons with polite disinterest. Reed had a paper coffee cup balanced on one knee. He wasn't reading anything, wasn't on his phone. He was just watching the park the way he watched everything, quietly, completely. Missing nothing. That was when the woman arrived. Her name was Natasha. She came into the off-leash area through the iron gate on the south side, pulling a small white Pomeranian on a bejeweled leash. She was dressed in a cream-colored blazer and tailored trousers, her hair done, her nails done, her sunglasses the kind with a logo visible from 10 meters away. She moved through the park the way certain people move through spaces they have decided belong to them, without checking whether others had already claimed a place, without slowing down, without looking directly at anyone. She was not alone. A few steps behind her came a young woman named Petra, who appeared to be some kind of personal assistant. She was carrying Natasha's bag, Natasha's phone, and a small bottle of mineral water, and she wore the particular expression of someone who had learned to make herself invisible. Natasha let the Pomeranian, whose name, it would emerge, was Bijou, off the leash near the center of the field and watched it dart toward a cluster of other small dogs. She crossed her arms and surveyed the park with an expression of mild dissatisfaction, as if the park had been arranged specifically for her and had fallen short. Axel noticed Bijou immediately. He raised his head, tracked the movement, then put his chin back down. He had been socialized around other dogs since he was 8 weeks old. He was not interested. Bijou, however, was different. The little dog bounced in a wide arc across the grass, looped back, and headed straight for Axel with the full confidence of an animal that had never faced a consequence in its life. Bijou sniffed at Axel's ear. Axel turned his head slowly and looked at the Pomeranian with calm, enormous patience. Bijou barked. Axel blinked. Reed watched this without moving. Then Bijou did something unexpected. The little dog grabbed the edge of Axel's ear with its teeth, not hard, not aggressive exactly, more like a demand for attention, and pulled. Axel stood up. He didn't growl, he didn't snap. He simply stood, turned to face Bijou, and positioned himself so his body was between the Pomeranian and whatever Bijou had been approaching. It was a gesture of pure training. He was creating distance, de-escalating. Natasha saw none of this clearly. What she saw from 30 meters away was a large black dog standing over her small white dog. She started walking fast, The narrator pauses here, because what happens next is the kind of thing that occurs in a fraction of a second and takes much longer to fully understand. Some people, when they feel afraid, slow down. They look. They try to understand what they are seeing before they act. Others move immediately from fear to action, bypassing comprehension entirely. Natasha was the second kind of person, and she was carrying, tucked into the side of her bag, a long metal grooming comb. The kind used to work through a thick-coated dog's fur, with a handle built for grip. She pulled it out. She walked up to where Axel was standing, and she brought the comb down hard across his flank. The sound of it carried across the park. Reed was on his feet before the sound finished. He crossed the distance in 6 steps, placed himself between Axel and Natasha, and took the next blow on his forearm. He didn't flinch. He just stood there, his arm raised, absorbing it, looking at Natasha with an expression that was not angry. Exactly. It was something more controlled than anger. It was the expression of a man who had already assessed the situation completely and was now managing it. "Stop," he said. One word. Flat. Absolute. Natasha stopped. Not because she was frightened, not yet, but because something in his voice had a quality she didn't quite recognize. It wasn't aggression. It wasn't pleading. It was the voice of someone who simply did not expect to have to say a thing twice. "That dog came at Bijou," she said. Her voice was high and tight. "I saw it. He went after my dog." Reid looked at her for a moment, then he reached down and put his hand on Axel's neck, a slow, deliberate stroke. "He was standing," Reid said. "He didn't touch your dog. Don't tell me what I saw. He's trained. He doesn't attack." Natasha's eyes moved from Reid to Axel and back. Something about the way the dog stood, perfectly still, no panting, no nervous movement, seemed to register, even if she didn't know what to make of it. "Well, he frightened Bijou," she said, with less certainty now. "Your dog grabbed his ear." A beat of silence. Petra had appeared behind Natasha, holding the bag and the phone and saying nothing, looking at the ground. Several families near the edge of the field had stopped what they were doing and were watching. A man named Douglas, who had been walking his golden retriever along the fence line, had his phone out. He wasn't sure why exactly. Something about the way the scene had unfolded made him feel it should be recorded. He pressed record. Natasha lifted her chin. She had the practiced ease of someone who rarely lost arguments because she rarely allowed them to become arguments. She simply declared things and waited for the world to rearrange itself accordingly. "That animal," she said, nodding at Axel, "should not be in a public space if he cannot be controlled." "He was controlled," Reid said. "He was lying down. I want your information. Name, contact. I'll be speaking to the park authority." Reid looked at her. He was thinking about something, though his face showed nothing. He was thinking about the 16 months he had spent in conditions that would not be described in this park, in this city, on this particular Saturday in September. He was thinking about the weight of the decision to say nothing versus the weight of the decision to say something. He was a private man. He did not use his service as a credential in civilian arguments. He reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out a plain business card. He held it out. Natasha took it without looking at it. "You'll be hearing from me," she said. She called Bijou, clipped the leash on, and walked away. Petra followed, glancing back once with an expression that might have been an apology. Reid sat back down on the bench. Axel lay back down on the grass. A woman pushing a stroller walked past, made brief eye contact with Reid, and said quietly, "She hit your dog. That wasn't right." Reid nodded once. The woman kept walking. Douglas, the man with the golden retriever, stopped at the bench. "I've got that on video," he said. "If you need it." "Thank you," Reid said. "What kind of dog is that?" "German Shepherd, military." A pause. "Yeah," Reid said. Douglas nodded slowly. "My son's in the reserves." "What unit?" Reid picked up his coffee cup. "I'm not able to say." Douglas nodded again as if that was answer enough. He walked on. The card Reid had given Natasha had his first name and a phone number on it. Nothing else. When Natasha arrived home, to a large house in Oak Bay, The kind of neighborhood where the hedges were trimmed to a uniform height, and the houses all had names. She handed the card to Petra and told her to find out everything about this person. Petra was good at her job. She was efficient and discreet, and she had worked for Natasha for 4 years. She ran the name and number through the contacts she had, cross-referenced some things, made a couple of careful inquiries, and by that evening she came to Natasha with a look on her face that was difficult to read. "What?" Natasha said, without looking up from her laptop. "The man from the park," Petra said. "Yes?" Petra set a printout on the desk. It contained very little information, which was itself a form of information. "He's Naval Special Operations," Petra said. "That's all I could find. There's almost nothing on him." Natasha looked at the paper. "What does that mean, Naval Special Operations?" Petra chose her words carefully. "It's the Canadian equivalent of Navy SEALs, JTF-2 adjacent. They don't publicize the names of operators." A long silence. "So he appears to be active duty," Petra said. "On leave." Natasha sat back in her chair. For the first time since the park, something moved behind her eyes. Not quite guilt, not quite fear. Something more like recalibration. "I may have overreacted," she said. "You hit his dog," Petra said carefully. "With a metal combi was protecting Bijou. Bijou weighs 4 kilograms, the other dog wasn't moving." Natasha closed the laptop. There are people in the world, the narrator will note, who move through life in a particular kind of bubble, insulated by money, by position, by the sheer force of having always gotten away with things. Not all of them are cruel people at their core. Some of them are simply people who have never been made to feel the weight of what they do to others. They mistake impunity for innocence. "What should I do?" Natasha said. Petra blinked. In 4 years, Natasha had never asked her that question. The video that Douglas posted appeared on 2 local Facebook community groups that evening. It showed in clear and steady footage Natasha raising the comb, bringing it down on Axel, and then bringing it down again, this time intercepted by Reed's arm. It showed Reed's composure. It showed Natasha's posture. It showed Axel, at no point aggressive, sitting and then standing, and then calmly returning to Reed's side once Reed arrived. The video had 400 views by midnight. By Sunday morning it had 11,000. By Sunday afternoon, someone in the comments section had identified Natasha by name. Someone else had found the company she chaired, a property development firm called Harlow Meridian, which specialized in high-end residential projects in the Greater Victoria area. Someone else had found the firm's social media pages. The comments on those pages began to shift. Natasha's communications director, a man named Warren, called her at 7 Sunday evening. "We have a situation," he said. "I know," she said. "The video? I know, Warren. Clients are calling. One of the Sonich project partners has already sent an email. They want to know if it's you." Natasha was standing at the window of her living room, looking out at the street. The hedges were perfectly trimmed. The lights were on in the neighbors' houses. Everything looked exactly as it always looked. "It's me," she said. Warren was quiet for a moment. "What happened?" "I thought the dog was attacking Bijou." "Was it?" She didn't answer that. "What do you want to do?" Warren said. Natasha turned from the window. On the couch, Bijou was asleep on a cashmere blanket, tiny and white and utterly unaware. In the kitchen, she could hear her son Theo, though Theo was not his name, but we will come to that. She could hear her son moving around, getting water from the fridge. Her son was 9 years old. His name was, she reminded herself, not Theo. His name was Miles. Miles had been at a birthday party all day Saturday and had come home to a mother who was unusually quiet. He hadn't asked why. Kids with perceptive mothers learn quickly not to ask. "I need to think," Natasha said. "Think fast," Warren said. "Monday morning is not far away." She didn't sleep. Not much. She lay in her room and stared at the ceiling and went back over the moment in the park the way you go over something you cannot stop seeing. She had been afraid. She genuinely had been afraid. She had seen a large dark animal standing over Bijou, and she had moved without thinking, the way any person might. She knew that. She could tell herself that. But she had also seen the dog stand calmly the moment Reed arrived. She had seen how still it was. She had felt, in the moment she said, "Don't tell me what I saw," that she already suspected she might be wrong. She had hit the dog anyway. She had hit the man's arm. She had told him he would be hearing from her. There was a long stretch of the night where Natasha tried to decide who she was, not who she appeared to be, not who she told people she was at charity galas and project launches, who she actually was, at the level where no PR strategy could reach. She didn't arrive at a comfortable answer. At 4 in the morning she got up, went to her study, and found the plain card on her desk where Petra had left it. She turned it over in her hands. A name. A number. Nothing else. She sat down and started to write. Reed was up at 5:30, which was late for him. He'd taken Axel out for an early run along the waterfront, the two of them moving together in the gray before dawn, the straight flat and silver on their left. No one else around except a few other early risers who nodded and moved on. Axel ran a half-pace behind Reed's right shoulder, as he always did. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. They had run like this in various countries and conditions for nearly 3 years. Back at his sister's house, Reed showered and made coffee and sat at the kitchen table while Axel ate breakfast, with the focused efficiency of a dog who treated meals as a tactical necessity rather than a pleasure. His sister's name was Prue. She worked in marine biology and kept hours that were either very early or very late. And right now she was at the kitchen counter assembling a packed lunch with the same distracted efficiency she'd had since childhood. She was 5 years older than Reed, and she was the person on earth he trusted completely. "You're famous," she said without looking up. "I know. 12,000 views as of this morning. I know. Douglas is a good man. Good footage." Reed drank his coffee. "Are you going to do anything about it?" Prue said. "She hasn't done anything yet." Prue looked at him. "She hit Axel." "She hit you." "She was scared," Reed said. Prue stared at him for a moment. "You are impossible," she said with great affection. Reed's phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. He looked at it. He picked up. "Is this Reed?" A woman's voice. Careful. Controlled but not entirely. "Yes." A pause. "This is Natasha. From the park yesterday." He said nothing. "I'm calling too." Another pause. He could hear her choosing words. "I behaved badly. I was frightened for my dog and I acted before I thought. And I hit your dog and then I hit you and I said things that were unkind and untrue. I'm sorry." Reed looked at Axel, who had finished his breakfast and was now sitting near the back door, waiting to be let into the yard. "How's your arm?" Natasha said. "Fine. I'm told you're in the Navy. I'm not going to confirm information about my service to a stranger," he said evenly. "Right. Of course." Another pause. I wanted you to know that I know what I did was wrong. Not because of the video. Because it was wrong." Reed was quiet for a moment. "Axel's fine," he said. "He's had worse." A longer pause on her end. He heard something in the silence that he recognized. It was the particular quality of a person absorbing something they needed to absorb. "Axel," she said. "That's his name." "Yes." Is there anything I can do to make this right?" Reed thought about this. He was not, by nature, a transactional person. He did not want her money, and he did not want a public display. He thought about what he actually wanted, and the answer was simple. "Don't do it again," he said, "to anyone's dog or anyone's person." She was quiet. "That's all?" she said. "That's a lot," he said. "If you actually do it." He heard what might have been a short, surprised sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a sob, something in between. "Okay," she said. "Okay." The video, by Sunday evening, had reached 63,000 views. Warren put together a communication strategy. It involved Natasha releasing a written statement, acknowledging what had happened, taking responsibility, announcing a donation to a Canadian military working dog rehabilitation program, and requesting that people allow the matter to resolve privately. It was a clean, professional statement, and it said the right things. The narrator will observe that statements of this kind are always complicated. They can be genuine or they can be strategic, and often they are both at once, and people on the outside have no way of knowing the proportion. What can be said is that Natasha wrote the statement herself. She declined Warren's first 3 drafts. She insisted on language that didn't hedge, language that said I was wrong, not there was a misunderstanding. Warren thought this was a strategic error. He said so. Natasha overruled him. The statement went out Monday morning. The response was mixed, as responses always are. Some people accepted it. Some people said it wasn't enough. Some people said it was a PR move. A few people who had experienced Natasha in a professional capacity came forward with their own opinions. The Sonich project partners were reassured. One smaller client terminated their relationship anyway. Douglas, the man with the golden retriever, posted a follow-up comment on the original video. She called him. He told me. That's enough for me. People argued about whether that was enough. They always do. 3 weeks passed. Reed's leave was coming to an end. Prue had taken days off where she could, and they had cooked dinner together and gone walking along the Dallas Road waterfront, and talked about things they never talked about in any other context. Their parents, who had both died in a car accident 8 years ago. The particular shape of grief that doesn't go away but eventually learns to share space with the rest of your life. What Reed thought about when he was in the field, and what he thought about when he wasn't. He thought about Prue's kitchen, he told her. The specific smell of coffee in the early morning and the sound of her moving around. She told him that was the nicest thing he had ever said to her. He told her not to push it. On the last Friday of his leave, Reed was walking Axel through Beacon Hill again. He'd come to like the park, despite everything, or maybe because of it. When he heard a voice behind him, Reed. He turned. It was Natasha. She was wearing different clothes than the last time. Jeans, a plain jacket, no logo sunglasses. Bijou was on the leash beside her, and beside her, on her other side, was a boy. 9 or 10 years old, sandy-haired, holding a paper bag from a coffee shop. "Miles, stay beside me," she said quietly. She stopped a few feet from Reed. She looked different than she had at the park. She looked, in fact, like someone who had been thinking hard about something for 3 weeks. "I wasn't sure I'd run into you again," she said. "I leave on Monday," Reed said. She nodded. "I hoped." She stopped. "I don't want anything. I'm not here to ask you anything. I just wanted you to see that we're out here trying to do better." She glanced at Miles. "I'm teaching him that when you do something wrong, you go back to the place where you did it, and you try to be different there. You don't just avoid it." Reed looked at the boy. Miles was looking at Axel with barely concealed awe. "Can I?" Miles began. "Ask properly," Natasha said. Miles straightened up. "Could I say hello to your dog, sir?" Reed looked at the boy for a moment. "Axel," he said quietly. The dog looked up. "Greet." Axel walked forward 3 steps, sat and waited. Miles crouched down and put his hand out, fingers down, and let Axel smell him. He'd been taught that somewhere. Reed noted it. "He's so calm," Miles said. "He's had a lot of practice," Reed said. Miles put his hand on Axel's neck, tentative then more confident. Axel sat and bore it with great dignity. The morning was cool. The oaks were almost bare now, their leaves caught in slow spirals on the grass. Bijou sat at Natasha's feet and did not, this time, approach the German shepherd. "He deployed with you?" Natasha asked. She was watching her son with the dog. 3 times. "What does that?" She seemed to be figuring out how to ask something. "Does he know that it's dangerous out there?" Reed thought about how to answer this. He thought about the things Axel knew, and the things Axel couldn't possibly know, and the things that didn't require knowing because they were simply felt at the bone level and acted upon. "He knows his job," Reed said. "He knows I'm there. That's enough for him." Natasha was quiet for a while. Miles had moved from Axel's neck to Axel's ears, which Axel tolerated with enormous patience and apparent enjoyment. "Thank you," Natasha said, "for picking up the phone. You made the call," Reed said. "You didn't have to answer it. He hadn't thought about that. He'd answered, because the number was unknown, and he always picked up unknown numbers. Old habit, operational instinct. But she wasn't wrong. He could have let it go to voicemail. He could have handed the whole thing to a lawyer and let it grind. Some people would have said that was what she deserved. Reed didn't think much in terms of what people deserved. He thought in terms of what needed doing and what could be let go. "Miles," Natasha said. "We should go." Miles stood up slowly. He looked at Axel one more time. "He's the best dog I've ever seen," he said, with complete seriousness. "He's the best dog I've ever known," Reed said. Miles looked up at him. "Do you get scared when you go away, Miles?" Natasha said softly. But Reed considered the question with the same gravity with which it was asked. "Sometimes," he said. "But you go anyway." "Yeah," Reed said. Miles thought about this. Then he nodded, as if he had been told something he had been trying to figure out for a while, and it was simpler than he expected, and also harder. They walked away, Natasha and Miles and Bijou, down the path between the bare oaks, the leaves moving around their feet. Reed watched them go. Axel stood beside him, watching, too. Then Reed looked down at the dog, and Axel looked up at him, and whatever passed between them in that moment was not something that needed a name. Reed left Victoria on the Monday morning ferry, early, before the city was fully awake. Prue drove him to the terminal, and hugged him for a long time without saying anything, which was the right thing. He loaded his kit. Axel walked up the ramp without looking back, not because he didn't care, but because he trusted completely that wherever Reed was going, he was going too. The ferry moved out into the strait. Reed stood on the upper deck with his coffee and watched the city get smaller. The Empress Hotel, the harbor, the trees of Beacon Hill, just visible above the roofline, going gold against the early morning gray. He thought about a boy who asked whether you could be scared and go anyway, and whether the answer to that question was the whole thing, or close to it. He thought about a dog, lying calm and still while the world moved loudly around him. He thought about his sister's kitchen and the smell of coffee before dawn. Axel sat beside him on the deck, looking out at the water, the wind moving through his fur. The island disappeared behind them. The narrator has no dramatic conclusion to offer here. No verdict, no final judgment. What happened in Beacon Hill Park was small, as things go. A woman afraid for her dog. A man who stood between harm and what he was protecting. A moment of contact between two people who would not otherwise have shared a single word. And then 3 weeks of thinking on both sides. The world doesn't always offer grand resolutions. What it sometimes offers instead is this: a morning ferry, a cool deck, a dog who never needs to be told twice, and the particular quiet of a person who knows what they're going back to and goes anyway. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, quite a lot.